They gave me a wristband and a 9-digit identification string and told me to report to sublevel 4 by the 7th bell. I didn't ask what was on sublevel 4. The intake clerk had the narrow, pale blue face of a Vethrak administrative caste, and she spoke the way they all do, precise, clipped, with the faint harmonic overtone that passes for emotion in their register. She said the words disorientation examination, the way a person says routine physical. I took the wristband. I was 53 years old and had spent 31 of those years walking terrain that didn't want to be walked. Ice shelves on Coram IV that shifted 4 degrees per tidal cycle. Dust delta systems on Marin's world where the horizon moved. Subsurface cave networks on 3 different moons where the only constant was that nothing was. I had mapped all of it. Not for the academy, not for any academy, for a survey consortium that cared about 2 things: accuracy and whether you came back. I had always managed both. The misfiling was nobody's fault in particular. My transit credential from the consortium listed spatial reasoning as a primary competency, and the Vethrak intake system had translated that into cognitive navigation. And cognitive navigation cadets reported to sublevel 4 by the 7th bell, so there I was. The room was not large, 42 seats, tiered, facing a sealed door of gray composite that had no visible handle or seam. The other cadets were young, most of them Vethrak, a few Drasali with their silver-banded wrists, 2 Orathi, whose secondary eye clusters kept scanning the ceiling. One other human, a girl who looked about 19, sat 3 rows ahead of me and was writing something rapidly on her datapad. She glanced back when I sat down. Expression asked the obvious question. I had no useful answer for it. The proctor was not a body. It announced itself through the room's acoustics as a distributed tone. Low, resonant, coming from no single point. The Vethrak call this architecture a distributed cognition node. Everyone else calls it a voice in the walls, it said. The disorientation examination has a standard completion window of 6 hours. Candidates are advised that sensory environment within the course is non-static. Spatial, luminance, gravitational, and acoustic variables are subject to algorithmic alteration throughout the examination period. Candidates who exceed the completion window or elect to withdraw will activate their distress contact. There is no penalty for withdrawal. The examination measures adaptive orientation capacity. Then it said, candidates with a completion record of under 4 hours enter the accelerated navigation track. The course record is 5 hours 49 minutes. The Drasali to my left had gone still. The Orathi near the door were doing something with their secondary eyes. A rapid triple blink I'd seen before in high-stress pre-mission briefings. The girl 3 rows ahead had stopped writing. The door opened. Inside was dark for exactly 4 seconds. Then the light came up. Cool, shinless, the kind that produces no shadows and gives you nothing to orient by. The floor was smooth. The ceiling was at a height that felt wrong in a way I couldn't immediately locate. Maybe 10 centimeters too low, or the proportions were off laterally, or both. The corridor ahead branched at what appeared to be a 90-degree angle, but wasn't. I knew it wasn't because I'd walked enough distorted survey frames to feel the difference between a right angle and something close enough to read as 1. I stopped moving and stood still for a moment. This is the thing about disorienting environments. They are designed by someone. That someone had constraints. The maze had a start and an exit. That was the premise. The sensory manipulation, the shifting light, cursive corridor geometry, the gravity variance I was starting to feel now in my inner ear. All of it had to be applied on top of a fixed physical structure. The walls were in the same place they were always in. The floor did not actually move, even if the light made it feel like it did. The gravity wasn't truly variable. It was a localized field application that could be gradated but not reversed, because you still needed cadets to walk out on their own feet. I pulled the wristband to the inside of my wrist and pressed my thumb against the posit edge. Old habit, fieldwork habit. You take whatever tactile fixed point is available. Then I started walking, and I started counting. Not counting to navigate, counting to catalog. How long did a particular luminance shift cycle take before it reversed? 40 seconds. Did it vary? I walked the same corridor segment twice. 40 seconds. Fixed. That was one invariant. How far did the gravity gradient increase before it plateaued? About 6 meters from the last junction. Did the geometry distortion stack on a consistent axis? Yes. The apparent angle compression was consistent along what I was treating as the north-south run of the structure, which meant the east-west corridors would read as longer than they were, not shorter. I noted that. The acoustic manipulation. The low sub-frequency tone designed to produce mild spatial vertigo, pulsed at 19-second intervals. I felt it, and then I waited for it again. And it came back in 19 seconds, another invariant. I heard the first distress ping at approximately 14 minutes in. A soft tone, somewhere behind and to my left. Then silence. Then the architecture shifted. A new corridor opened where a wall had been, part of the algorithm responding to a candidate withdrawal. I noted the direction of the opening and did not take it. New paths introduced by the system meant nothing. Fixed structure was still the fixed structure. The young Arathi, I thought. They didn't do well with sustained acoustic manipulation. The secondary eye clusters were attuned to it, and it compounded rather than simply confused. I hoped it was one of the Arathi and not the girl. I kept walking. I kept counting. There is a discipline that cartographers call ground truthing. It means, regardless of what your instruments say, regardless of what the map says, regardless of what your eyes think they see, you identify the fixed physical facts that cannot be falsified by error or by environment, and you build your understanding from those outward. Instruments lie. Light lies. Your inner ear lies constantly and enthusiastically. The rock face does not lie. The distance your legs have actually covered does not lie. The number of junctions you have passed does not lie, as long as you counted. The consortium trained this into every surveyor in the first month, and then reinforced it every time someone came back wrong, turned around in a delta system, trapped below a shelf, calling for extraction 2 ridgelines from where they thought they were. Most of them had stopped trusting their instruments. I had stopped trusting my senses. There's a difference. I had been counting junctions. At 27 minutes, the luminance dropped to near zero for a full cycle, about 8 seconds of near blackness, which I had been anticipating based on the pattern I'd logged in the first 20 minutes. I stood still, one hand on the wall, and waited it out. When the light returned, I was exactly where I expected to be. At 35 minutes, I reached a section where the floor's apparent surface was doing something unpleasant with depth cues. A visual effect that made it look like the next 6 meters dropped sharply away. It didn't. I knew it didn't because the gravity gradient was unchanged, same as it had been for the last 8 minutes. Same as it had been in every corridor at this apparent depth in the structure. I walked through it. At 39 minutes, I found the exit. I knew it was the exit because it was the only sealed door in the structure with a dual-panel frame, same composite as the entrance, same dimensions, and a seam I could feel under my fingertips, even when the lighting was cycling low. I pressed the wristband contact against the release panel. The door opened. The room outside was empty of cadets. The proctor's distributed tone was present, though, and it ran a completion confirmation, a scan of the wristband, a verification of the exit contact. Then it ran it again. I had enough experience with automated systems to recognize when a system is checking its own output because the output doesn't match expectation. I sat down in the nearest seat and waited. The remaining cadets came through over the next 5 hours and 8 minutes. The girl arrived at 2 hours, 17 minutes, third overall, behind 2 Vethrak, who moved like they'd run something similar before. She sat 2 seats away from me, looked at the wristband reader, and looked at me. 41 minutes, she said. I nodded. She was quiet for a moment. Survey work? 31 years of it. She turned back to the door. We waited together. 3 days later, I received a new classification document. The Academy's administrative system had reviewed the examination result and amended my intake file. The original designation, Standard Cognitive Navigation Candidate, had been struck. The replacement, typed in the clean, narrow characters of Vethrak administrative script, read, Spatial Systems Unrestricted. I filed it and went to find breakfast.